The Bill of Rights, you've heard these words before. You maybe even know a little bit of what they are, hopefully from the other modules and watching the videos and doing the assignments or learning activities. You've got an idea of what they are. But remember, the Bill of Rights is just another name for the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. So those anti-federalists, for them to agree to this new Constitution, remember they were worried that this new government would be too powerful, too much like Parliament, too much like the king. The Anti-Federalists pushed for this idea that if we're going to have this new Constitution, they wanted rights specifically listed and attached to the Constitution. Alexander Hamilton and others said, well, you don't have to do that. It's already built in. Your rights as a citizen are already in there. But the Anti-Federalists said, no way. We don't want a strong government without a list of protections, a list of things that we can do, and we can do them and not have to worry that the government will come for us. And think of the Bill of Rights as also a list of things that the government cannot do. Right? The government cannot do certain things like take away your shotgun because of the Bill of Rights. Remember, these are all bundled together. It was a package deal. There were more than 10 originally, but by the time we get through Congress, where it has to go through the House and the Senate and then to 3/4 of the states, we end up with just 10. The first 10 would be the Bill of Rights. The other 17, to give us a total of 27, will happen over time. But the first 10 are bundled together as part of a package, and they become part of our Constitution in 1791. So we're going to go through each one of these first 5 amendments in this lecture, and we'll figure out ways to remember them that are easy, that you'll always remember these amendments for the rest of your time as an American citizen. Even when you're an adult, many years from now, you'll still remember how we remembered these. And then part 2 of this discussion, this will be in the next video over the second half of our Bill of Rights, 6 through 10. But in this video, we'll cover 1 through 5. All right, so let's start with the First Amendment. It is probably the most important. So it is number 1. I just remember this one because we think of the basics of living in America and our freedom, the freedom of religion and speech and press, the freedom to express yourself, to peacefully assemble, to petition your government. If you think the government's wrong, you're able to petition them and ask them to change or ask them to hear your case. All of this is all wrapped up in our First Amendment. All right? So think about the freedom of speech, for example. You in America can pretty much say whatever you want, but you know there are limits on all of your freedoms, and they only go so far. So this is very difficult sometimes for a free society because, for example, you may not like a certain type of music, but your neighbor may love that type of music and may play it loudly at their home. Do they have a right to play the music that you hate? Well, yes. Do they have the right to play your music, that music, loudly? Sometimes. What about 2 in the morning? Probably not. There are probably laws against that. So your freedom of expression only goes so far, right? Because your neighbors have a right to sleep. Now, one thing you should always remember is that these rights have been tested many times throughout the history of this country. And what you think is fine may not be what I think is fine. But our opinions really don't matter. What matters would be the Supreme Court. There are 9 people in the Supreme Court. They would hear a case, and if they believe that your neighbor has a right to play his music as loud as he wants all the time, even at 2 in the morning, then that's the rule, right? You only need 5 of the 9 to agree with your neighbor. Now, it doesn't mean that it always goes that far. These cases have always been decided way long ago, and generally the Supreme Court has said that there are limits to freedom of expression, and you can't do it in the middle of the night if it disturbs the peace. Same thing for religion. You can have whatever religion you want, but there are limits, right? You can't harm other people or people's property or animals, for example. You can't sacrifice animals as part of your religion. In our country, the Supreme Court has said no to that. But generally, for the most case, you can be whatever religion you want. You could have a demonstration in the streets. Again, you probably are going to have to get a permit from the local city. And again, the Supreme Court has said that's not a violation of your First Amendment. So all of these and the First Amendment have been tested with lots of court cases. This freedom of speech, what can you say? Can you say whatever you want about the president? Can you say whatever you want about the president in a newspaper? Is that freedom of press, freedom of speech? Generally, you can, but if you go too far, like if you threaten the president, not going to be protected under the First Amendment. Again, the president, threatening the president or saying things about him, that's a crime, even though you might say, well, it's part of my free speech. So all of these in the First Amendment, they are guaranteed to you. However, there are limits on all of them. These 5 or 6 things in Amendment 1 are protected by the First Amendment. It is number 1, but generally they only go so far. The Second Amendment has to do with the right to have a gun, and you can read what the actual amendment says. A well-regulated militia, being necessary for the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So, the Supreme Court has said that this amendment means that you can have pretty much any type of gun you want. A handgun, a shotgun, a rifle, even a machine gun is protected by the Second Amendment. They have put some limits on it. You can't just walk in and buy a machine gun. They have to run a background check on you and make sure you're not a criminal. All of that is part of the way states regulate guns. But for the most part, you can have a gun in America, assuming that you're a law-abiding citizen and you're of age 18. So I remember this one. A bear has 2 arms. So the right to bear arms. A bear has 2 arms. So, again, your Second Amendment doesn't extend forever. You can't have, say, a tank, because the Supreme Court would say, well, you have to be able to bear it, which means you have to hold it. So you don't have that right. But what about a machine gun that shoots 100 bullets a minute? Well, you might think we don't need that. I might think that's protected under the Second Amendment, but our opinions don't matter. The Supreme Court would ultimately decide whether guns that shoot 100 bullets a minute are protected under the Second Amendment. A bear has 2 arms, the Second Amendment. The Third Amendment is also a response to the Revolution and the time right before the Revolution, when the British would put their troops in people's homes, in the colonist homes. And colonists were expected to feed them, to wash their clothes, let them sleep on their bed, because there were no army bases at the time, and there were no police forces really. And so the redcoats walking around Boston needed a place to stay, and the king thought, well, if you're a loyal subject, you will let my soldiers stay in your home. People writing the Constitution and the amendments said, no, we don't like that. We don't want that. So the Third Amendment says there can be no army folks forced to stay in your home. So think of that as knock 3 times. The Third Amendment prohibits the military from coming to your house, staying in your basement, eating your Lucky Charms, bogging down your Netflix. They can't do that as a Third Amendment. Now, in extreme situations where we're maybe in a massive war and Congress passes some laws, it's possible. But during times of peace, no way. The Fourth Amendment you probably know a lot about just from watching television and movies. It has to do with the right of searches and seizures. So a seizure is when they take stuff from you. So again, this is a reaction to what was happening in the colonies. The king had issued what was called the Writs of Assistance, which said that the British military could just come to your home, kick in the door, search for smuggled goods, look for things that are illegal, see if you're part of, like, say, the Sons of Liberty or whatever, and you could be arrested. So people who wrote the Fourth Amendment, these anti-federalists, said we want to put this in the Constitution to protect us from this, because we've been down this road before with the king and Parliament, and we don't want this new government doing the same thing. So now you have a right in your home, your persons, in your house, in your paper, in your effects. Now you have the right not to be searched. So when it says secure in your persons, it means that they can't just stop you on the street and say, I want to check your pockets. They have to have a probable cause, as listed here in the amendment. They can't just come to your house. They can't search your car without a probable cause. Now you'll notice that nowhere in here does it mention the word car. Well, they didn't have cars then, but the Supreme Court has taken this Fourth Amendment and made it apply to cars and boats and your RV or whatever. If it's your domicile or it's your uh, big property, and they just can't come in and search it without a warrant, which is just a piece of paper from a court, a third party not involved in this, who looks at the evidence and says, yes, you have enough probable cause to search the home, to search the car, to search the RV, or whatever. So this one is a very interesting amendment. The Supreme Court has dealt with this a lot. There have been a lot of cases on this, and in this class we'll touch on a few of them. But generally, without probable cause, they can't come into your home. So 4, shut the door. Okay, so that's how I remember this one. If they don't have a warrant, they're not coming in. All right, they don't have that right. This prohibits basically what the British were doing during the Revolution. So 4, shut the door. So 1 amendment, First Amendment, has to do with, it is number 1, all the important things: freedom of speech, press, religion, the right to assemble. Bears have 2 arms. The Second Amendment has to do with the right to bear arms. The third, knock 3 times. You're not letting the troops in, because no quartering of troops during peacetime. The 4, shut the door. It helps if I physically make 4 on my fingers, and I make the action of swinging a door shut. 4, shut the door. Okay. The Fifth Amendment is also one that you hear a lot about on movies and on television. This was as a result of the way that the British treated the people they arrested back during the colonial times. They would often put them in jail without a trial. Maybe months and months would go by, years would go by, just put them in the dungeon, and they'd put them in jail for a crime, and then they would be found not guilty. They would be let out, then rearrested and tried again for that same crime, and they would do that again and again and again until they got a verdict that was guilty. They also would force you to talk in court. You did not have any kind of rights. If you didn't talk, they might torture you and force you to talk. So the Fifth Amendment, 5 to stay alive, are just things you know just from living in America probably. You don't have to talk, so you have the right to remain silent. Police today will tell you this right when they arrest you. So you don't talk to the police. You don't have to talk. You could hold off until you get an attorney. Say nothing. You have that right under the Fifth Amendment. Also, if they do arrest you and there is a trial and you are found not guilty, the government can't rearrest you for that same crime. Right? That's part of what we would call double jeopardy, which means they can't put you in double jeopardy. They can't have you on trial for the same crime twice. So if you get out, you're found not guilty, you can get out and say, I did it. They can't do anything about it. I would advise not doing that, but it's possible. So you don't have to talk, and you are not going to be arrested for the same crime twice. So 5 to stay alive in court. So these first 5 amendments are part of the Bill of Rights. They protect you. You have a right to be safe in your home. You don't have to worry about unreasonable searches and seizures of your person. So, for example, this image you see on the screen, this person being arrested, they will be searched because the police have probable cause. They've committed a crime. They will then seize you, which would mean you're not allowed to move. They'll put handcuffs on you. They're going to pat you down. They're going to look for things that are in your pockets. Because when you're being arrested, the police obviously have probable cause to believe that you did something wrong, broke a law, and so they are able to search and seize the property that's on you. But they just can't do that to anybody walking down the street. We're going to dig more into your civil liberties. That's when we say civil liberties, we mean what rights you have under the Constitution. We'll dig more into those in the next Part 2 video and throughout the course.